Professor, we can begin now. So I welcome all the our speakers today and the participants. We have a very interesting topic today, webinar series on public policy and governance, good governance with IIT Bombay. My colleague will introduce speakers, but the topics on which we're going to talk are the Tentacles of Digital Growth and Governance by Professor Shishir K, and the Real and the Mirage in AI Policy by Dr. Professor Anupam Guha. I think these topics are very relevant, and as we read and hear every day, digital growth, which is shaping the governance, as well as AI and what it is doing to the governance, as well as to bringing efficiency in our decision making and other processes. I think it would be very interesting to listen to their presentation, and we hope to see interesting conversation, discussion following this. So with that, I request my colleague Himanshi Rastogi, Associate Professor in National Center for Good Governance, to introduce speaker. First, Dr. Shishir K, and then Dr. Anupam Guha.
Thank you, DG sir.
later.
Thank you, sir, for chairing this webinar. So welcome to the 8th webinar of National Center for Good Governance, Public Policy and Good Governance series. We have the honor of collaborating with IIT Bombay for this webinar. The first speaker, we have Professor Shishir K. Sir is professor at Ashang Desai Center for Policy Studies at IIT Bombay. He will be speaking on the topic, the tentacles of digital growth and governance. Let me introduce him to you. He has over 25 years of teaching experience at different institutions that include IIM Bangalore, IIM Kozhikode, Ithaca College at New York. He is actively engaged in analyzing and theorizing various aspects of data economy, particularly structural dimensions of digitization on information flow. His interest ranges from political economy of data storage, data monetization, competitiveness of digital markets, venture capitalism, and digital economy. We welcome you, sir. I also take the honor of introducing our second speaker, Professor Anupam Guha. Sir is Assistant Professor at Ashang Desai Center for Policy Studies at IIT Bombay, and he will be speaking on the topic, the real and the mirage in AI policy. Sir is he's primarily working on AI policy, AI and labor. Before joining IIT Bombay, he has worked as senior researcher at Comcast Research, working on computational linguistic machine learning problems to make their systems respond to language centered around media. His areas of interest include artificial intelligence to digital societies, political economy of AI, and various digital platforms. Just to name a few, he is a PhD in computer science from University of Maryland, where he worked on multimodal language and vision AI systems and computational linguistics. We welcome you also, sir. Now I take this honor of welcoming our first speaker to please take the stage and go ahead with his presentation. Shishir, sir.
Yeah. Please upload my presentation. Can you upload it from your end, please?
We're doing that.
Okay. Yeah, so about 20 minutes, yes, I think is what you kept originally for the presentation.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'm trying to probably not do too much, but in 20 minutes, I'm going to go a little faster than usual. And I'm going to basically cover 3 points. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the following 3 points are basically the first point is around the question around what I'm calling the unprecedented growth of the digital economy, or if you want to call it the digital industry, is one of the quickest, and sharpest growth compared to other brick and mortar industries in, you can say in the history of modern capitalism. The second point is around questions of properties of the digitally based economy and how that has caused a lot of disruption in the brick and mortar industries. And last, towards the end, basically, I'm going to talk about how the process of extraction of digital data and its aggregation can be used, and I'm making the argument that can be used to create a public good, right? So three different elements. Hopefully I can do justice to all three. Right? Next, please. So just to, for us to be on the same page about two terms that we're going to use, throughout the presentation. One is the term of political economy, right? So most of you are probably very well aware, but just to put it on the slide here, it's a classical field that really studies relationships between markets and state in production and consumption, between individuals and society, using a diverse set of tools drawn from economics, political science, sociology, etc. Next, please. And on the other hand, the digital economy is basically, one could say, the effective acquisition, dissemination, use, and the virtual mobilization of data to create economic value. So these are, definitions. You could define them in different ways, but this is the way I'm going to use them. Next, please. So coming to the first point, right, just to give you a sense of how rapidly this digital economy has grown, because it is something to keep in mind. Next, please. So two points here. One, really, what were the enabling circumstances that allowed for this unprecedented development, right? And the emergence, basically, of digital platforms as an outcome of this rapid development, right? Which is really reorganizing or restructuring the flow of capital, labor, technology, and reorganizing the creation of economic value itself. Next, please. Next, yeah. So one can see that the mid 80s were really an important point, institutionally speaking, for the rise of digital economy. Yes, aspects of the internet and investment in all, on those aspects of the infrastructure were already happening before. But institutionally, really, in the 80s, really, there is a huge increase in the interest. So there's government support through laws and policies, and also something that we often ignore is the support from venture capitalists. I'm not going to read through all of these, but you find the Semiconductor Act, there are treaties that US and Japan put together. All of this has a decisive impact on hardware production. And you have the VCs coming in by mid 80s, for instance, between 2010 and 2020, all these large companies acquire more than 400 firms, right? And they have a huge capital, capital chest which they use for this acquisition. Next, please. What you also find is that for the rise of the digital economy, there are these, two things that happen. Basically, the use of devices, right? These are ubiquitous, seamless interoperability of IT and digital platforms. And platforms, and I'm coming back to that point later, platforms acquiring near monopoly positions. Next, please. So the digital presence is by now almost universal. The raw materials of the digital economy is really our existing information and culture, right? And the materiality of this internet, right, is something very fascinating. The radically distributed design, in the sense that who is at the either end of the internet is something that is, not of consequence, right? So there's agnosticism of our devices. And there's an important point, net neutrality, which is often being challenged, and perhaps in the the change in the regime in US, we'll again see a challenge to net neutrality, but which is something very crucial. So the contemporary digital model is built over really a free data-driven model, right? And considerably, we are moving in the direction of that this data-driven model is becoming exhaustively commercial. Next, please. Yeah, go through the slide, please. So what you find, as I said earlier, is the outcome of this digital economy is something that we are all very acquainted with now, is these platforms, or what we call also multi-sided platforms. These are powerful drivers of digital value creation. Right? I've just put this in terms of a jigsaw puzzle of sorts, all fitting in from disruption, excellent infrastructure, algorithmic governance, aggregation of data, extraction of data, precarity in terms of workers, excellent interfaces, and also rating interfaces. So all of this really comes together in the interface, right, in the apps. Right? And the brilliance of the interaction with users is through these things coming together, right, which allows these platforms to really scale very quickly. Next, please. So these tech companies, as I mentioned earlier, have huge cash reserves by now, right? And next, you can see, for instance, these top companies like next, please. So Apple, Microsoft, Google, etc. You can see the cash reserves. And why do they have those cash reserves? Well, they have excellent, as I've mentioned earlier, indicated for some of them, excellent advertising sort of engines, right? But also the fact that they are being able to scale up very quickly, right? The network effects have worked very well. So the world's largest tech companies, for instance, have spent close to 260, more than $250 billion buying up potential rivals worth less than $1 billion, right? This is since the start of 2021, right? Next. And there's also an appetite for sustained loss. This is where venture capitalists also come in. One can gain market share, but also work at a loss. And some of the largest venture capitalists, right, SoftBank, etc., have been funding them. Next. This is one interesting slide that just gives you a sense of the shift, if you will, in terms of the market assessment of these companies. Previous slide, please. So if you look at 3 years, no. Yeah, just please stay on this slide. Yeah. So 2009, 2016 to 2019, right? What you see is that for the top 5 companies, Microsoft to Facebook, in 2009, they were not even present, right, in terms of the top 5 of the market cap companies, right, in US. And by 2019, they almost ranked by 1 to 5. So how is it that these companies, mostly they're called tech companies, data companies, how are they able to move further ahead than, say, large pharma companies, large oil companies, right? All of these other very large modern capitalist firms are all sort of put behind by these companies. The question that we should ask as students of this area, right? What is happening? That's why I was saying unprecedented, the scaling of this, the last 15 to 20 years. Yeah, next, please. So the first point that I've kind of tried to just put up for your consideration is that this digital economy that we are right in the middle of, in the throes of, has had the quickest and most unprecedented growth in comparison to all prior brick and mortar industries. Right? And I've given you some kinds of snippets, some kind of evidence about this. It has combined legislation, the digital infrastructure, devices, VCs, digital companies growth, etc. All of this has come together for this to have worked out. Second, yeah, next, please. So the second provocation is around the questions of properties of the digital-based economy. What are these properties and how are they causing the disruption? Next. So go through the slide, yeah. So one thing one can put one's finger on is that the traditional link, so-called traditional link between the flow of product-related information, the product itself, right? The example to be given here that this relation is being broken. The example is, for instance, between a physical book and an e-book. A physical book, but the thing common between e-book and physical book is the fact that you can read, right? The difference is the medium. Right? The economics of producing a book versus producing an ebook is in fact all the difference that really contributes, for instance, why companies like Amazon have completely disrupted the entire, if you want to call it, the book chains in the US, right? The brand of Barnes and Nobles, for instance, one of the largest bookstore chains in US, completely disrupted by, and I'll come back to this point later, right? So the mechanisms for delivering economic value are really destabilizing the older industry structures. And you can see this in newspapers, you can see this in, obviously, as I mentioned, films, books, everything, right? Anything that can be digitized is really disrupting the older economy. So the relation between the economics of things and the economics of information, this relation is being rapidly broken. And I gave you the example of ebooks versus physical books. Right, next, please. Yeah, go through the slide, please. So in terms of characteristics of digital goods as opposed to industrial goods, what you can see is that, well, on the one hand, and we know all of these characteristics, that digital goods are non-rivalrous, right? The use of information by one person does not exclude others. On the other hand, industrial goods are rivalrous, right? Used by one excludes others. And you can go down the list. There's an economics of abundance in a way. For digital goods, the more you use in information, the more its value grows. While in the industrial goods, it's an actually economics of scarcity. The more a good is used, the less its value. Right. And the last point there is, for instance, it can be produced, stored, and distributed at almost zero marginal cost. If it is, for instance, the fact that I can share my slides with all of you at barely any cost, right? I mean, I just a few shift of keystrokes at my end can share, right? So the zero marginal cost is a great divider between, in digital and industrial goods. But for industrial goods, the cost of the zero marginal cost, the marginal cost is not zero, it's actually much higher, right? So between non-rivalrousness, the economics of abundance, and the zero marginal cost, you can have a very big political economic difference as opposed to industrial goods. Next, please. Go ahead. Go through the slide. Yeah, thank you. So the point is, for instance, what is happening with the production of digital goods? As I already mentioned, the raw materials of information economy is our culture, our information. It's non-rivalrous and the marginal cost is close to zero. That is creating a huge amount of disruption. And economics also defines a market as producing a good efficiently only when it is pricing the good at its marginal cost, right? So if you in the digital context, if you produce a good at its marginal cost and it's close to zero, you can't really make a profit, right? Economically speaking. So when you look at platforms and how they actually are able to make profits, right? It's not over the question of, right, the use or the distribution of data, right? It is built over other things like use of data, which is free, but to make advertisement out of it. And the intellectual property doesn't make really much sense in the digital context, except for large databases. In fact, IP actually impedes the flow of information, right, in the digital world. It makes agents and resources very sticky. So there's all these disruptions that I'm pointing to. Next, please. So two examples, I'll go through them quickly. One is the crisis within the publishing industry. Yeah, go through the slide. So one quick point to make here is that, well, about 93% of all books, right, sell fewer than 1,000 units and account for only 13% of all sales. Right? So the flip side is that basically bestsellers in books are 7% of titles, but 87% of sales. So it's the very top of the pyramid, the tiny elite section of the pyramid in the publishing industry who are seemingly able to make most of the profit. Right? This is your traditional publishing industry, which is ripe for disruption. Right? So 80 to 90% of authors barely make any money in the conventional publishing industry. Right? This kind of industry is ripe for disruption because of the digitization process and because entities like Amazon, etc., have used that to their advantage. Next, please. Yeah. So anyway, the point sometimes made is that, what is the difference between piracy and on the one hand versus um, basically being able to be obscure, right? The second example quickly is in terms of music industry. If you remember, some of you perhaps do, right? In the early 90s, if you went out and bought a music CD, out of 15, 20 songs, you could barely listen to 5 because those were the ones that you wanted to listen to, but the other 15 were bundled, right? Together with these 5 songs, and you had to buy the entire CD of 200 rupees, but you actually were interested in sort of the 5 out of the 20. This was the bundling. And again, this industry was ripe for disruption, right? I'm not going to go through this again, but what you find is that, go to the next point, next few points, yeah. So there's a young person called Sean Fanning, he creates a software called Napster, right, which basically allows people to download music from each other. And the US music industry is up in arms that, well, they need to basically take Napster to the court. They killed Napster, but the writing is on the wall. Music industry is up for disruption. And soon after that, you have iTunes by Apple, and now you have things like Spotify, many others, right? Complete digitization of the music industry, right? So this has happened merely within a period of 10, 15 years, right? So what disrupted the music industry, what disrupted the publishing industry, right, is basically, I'm making an argument partly to do with the question of the institutions and the properties of the digital economy. Next, please. Go ahead, next slide. So the second point was basically properties of digitally based economy has caused and is causing very significant disruption in the brick and mortar industries. Right. The next point. Yeah, next slide, please. Last point is basically about the extraction of digital data and how this is creating a new class of economic assets. And what I'm going to try and argue briefly is that this digital data, aggregated digital data, has potential significant use as a public good. Go ahead, next. So the collection and circulation of data is now the most central element of increasingly most sectors of contemporary capitalism. Data collection is driven by the perpetual cycle of capital accumulation, right? And there's an imperative of sorts to capture all kinds of data 24/7, right? And this is, creating its own set of problems with creating data centers, etc. So many common practices of data accumulation should actually be understood in terms of data extraction, wherein data is taken with little regard for consent and compensation. So the issues about data trustworthiness, data privacy also come in. So there's an inexorable, relentless need to capture and aggregate data, extract data. Next, please. So this extraction and scaling and networking is relating to creation of these big data and big data platforms, digital platforms. Next, please. The success of some of them have become because of commercial use and the extraction of data, right, to create advertising. So digital platforms function as 3-4 things: intermediary infrastructures. They have, as I said already, network effects, aim to maximize user engagement, right? The more you stay on the platform, the better it is. And they also use things like cross-subsidization, right? They give you Gmail for free, but the data that you get from Gmail, right? I'm assuming everybody in this audience has a Gmail address. Interesting, right? And so the data extracted from free services is used to build other kinds of, monetized services. Next, please. Go ahead. So there is almost, the big tech has almost become the obligatory passage point for all types of exchange in the digital economy. Right? This is where we are. The huge increase in data centers is also part of this point, point being made, right? A passage point of data extraction. So big tech is at the center of a new socio-technical system, functioning as its core, if you will, core operating system. Right? There's an imperative to extract data. Next, please. So data is being, in a way, manufactured and also being mined or discovered. Manufactured in the sense of processed, and the intelligence that is gained out of it, right? That is also aiding and abetting this whole big tech monopoly model. Next, please. So coming more to the question of public good use, right? Well, now we know that data contributes, in fact, more to world GDP than the flow of physical goods itself, right? London Stock Exchange it profits more from the selling of its data than from the commission it makes from the trading. That's the amount of data valuation that's going on. So these platforms are collecting data, zealously hoarding it for exclusive use, right, and appropriating its value unilaterally. So where can public good use come in? Where does public policy come in here, right? If data is increasingly the most valuable digital economy resource, then maintaining exclusive access to it by digital companies in some ways is key to the dominant digital economy model. Next, please. So there's no free flow of data. Data, in a way, is free for data corporations to take, but no obligations to contribute back. This is where public policy can intervene. Next, please. So economic governance of data constitutes one of the most important and urgent policy challenges facing governments today, right? So next, please. Yeah, go through this. So can governments potentially ensure that one of society's key resources is available for shared public use, right? So there are examples in other contexts. For instance, in Germany, competition law recognizes data access to be an important competition issue, right? So if there are these large monopolies who are endowed with huge amounts of data, just look at mobility, right? Low-hanging example, right? For the many of the cities, including Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, etc. The fact that you can aggregate that data of traffic flows, say from two parts of the city, and be able to figure out, well, how is the traffic flowing? That's something that can be perhaps done, right? There is this data that Ola, Uber, and other platforms have. It's possible with policy interventions to be able to access their data and use it for public policy purposes, right? Many things have to come in to be able to ensure that, but that's the direction that I'm suggesting. Next, please. So, how, if data is an entire community's collective intelligence, right? So how can policy making, governance, and provide public services that soon can become impossible if we do not have access to data held by platforms? That is the crucial point to be made here, right? Because in the DPI that we often say, what does P stand for, right? It ought to stand for digital public infrastructure, right? But how does the privatization of data, how can that become much more public, right? And that is possible, one can argue, through public policy interventions, right? So I think there's perhaps one more slide and then I'm closing. Yeah, go ahead. So the three provocations, as I mentioned, just to conclude, is one was around the unprecedented growth of this economy. Second was about the properties that are really disruptive. And the third is basically about questions around, extraction of digital data and how that can be turned around and actually made an argument for use as a public good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We request the audience, if they have any questions, to either post it on the comment section, or we will take all the questions and comments at the end of this webinar. So now we go ahead to our second expert speaker, Professor Anupam Guha. He is going to speak on the real and the mirage of AI policy. We welcome you, sir, for the session.
Hello, am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I will start now. Please do tell me if my volume needs to be higher. So this talk is essentially about the need for people.
Professor, your voice is not clear. Have you joined through app or through web?
Let me try to speak through my laptop.
Yeah, I think, and please download the app and then join, because I think through the web it's not very clear.
Hello. One second.
So,
You're audible, but your voice is a little stuffy. So sir is suggesting that, like we said, that so please download the app. So if you can join by the app, WebEx app.
Trying again. Am I audible?
audible, but voice is not clear.
I'm sorry. I'm talking through my laptop. Perhaps something is creating an issue. One second.
Have you joined through app or WebEx app or WebEx page, web page?
As an audience, I can hear Professor quite clearly.
अरे
उसको बंद करो ना शीश।
क्या?
Trying again, third time. Is it better?
Is it clear to others?
Hello.
Professor, we can hear you, but it's not very clear. I think why don't you log out and try to log in through the WebEx web page, like say app.
I am through the web page. I'm not using the app.
He's not using the app.
So can you download the app and join through the app?
Like
So
okay.
if I may say, it's very clear to me. Part of the audience.
हमारे यहाँ क्लियर नहीं है। उनको बोलो ना, पहले बताया नहीं था कि तुम लोग I think अच्छा, it's clear to others.
So we can go ahead.
Shall I go ahead then?
No, can you join through the app if possible quickly? Otherwise, we can go through. We can go.
All right. Let me try to download the app. 1 second. It will take a bit of time.
चलो, बोलो बात क्या? बात क्या?
Hello. Am I audible? I've joined through the app.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're clear now, loud and clear.
Okay, please go ahead. Thank you.
All right. All right. So today's talk is about, and apologies for the delay. Today's talk is about the need to think critically about how public policy and governance needs to be done around the issue of AI. I will not go into a motivational speech about why you should do it. I think it should be at this point apparent to most people that artificial intelligence has not just a deep impact on social structures, but more importantly on economic structures, and a nation state which is in a developing phase like India cannot afford to be ignorant about it, or cannot afford to be directed in a mechanical manner, just copying policies from more advanced nation states on it, but deserves to have a critical plan on the why of it. Next slide, please. So, first of all, to introduce you to how governance on AI is done in more developed countries, there are three competing schools of thought: AI ethics, AI safety, and AI alignment. In very short, AI ethics looks at the normative impact of AI deployment. So the question is, how will this particular AI deployment impact society? Is it a good impact, bad impact? That's AI ethics. AI safety, on the other hand, is an internal look at AI systems. It's AI safety says that we will try to prevent the algorithm doing something we don't want before it impacts society. So AI ethics is looking at the system as a black box. It's looking at its outside impact, while AI safety is looking at the system from an inside point of view. It says that development itself can be done in a way which is beneficial to society. Now, you would have immediately realized that because of the nature of these two schools of thought, they have a certain degree of bias. So AI ethics is biased towards government intervention because it's looking at the outside impact of AI systems, while AI safety is more biased towards corporate ownership of AI, because most AI systems are developed by private companies. So people who say that we should create the safety mechanism within the algorithm are essentially saying that the companies which create AI systems should be left in charge of how they are being deployed. There is a third school of thought called AI alignment, which says that instead of worrying about who is controlling AI, whether we are looking at it as a from the outside or from the inside, we should try to create AI systems which align with human values. Like we should try to design AI systems which operate in a way which is in alignment with human morality or with human values, etc. Now, there are weaknesses in all these three models of governance, and which one we should go for as a country is a matter of strong debate right now. Next slide, please. I'm going to, in today's talk about a few popular narratives which right now are present in Indian government, academia, etc., related to AI governance. And I will try to flag a few weaknesses in those narratives so that we can develop a stronger vision when it comes to governing AI systems. So there is a claim right now that sovereignty is the key thing for India to worry about. Like, this is how the claim goes, that powerful countries like America, China, EU, etc., have kind of a dominance on AI production. AI models which are being built, they are coming from these countries, and India doesn't. So there is a push that we should be A, developing our own infrastructure for AI, and B, we should be developing our own models, our own foundational models. And because of this direction of AI governance, you would have known, for example, that new bodies to govern AI are being built in India. There is a India AI body, and a lot of money is also coming from the government towards a private industry to develop our own foundational models, and more importantly, to buy a lot of GPU chips so that we have the physical infrastructure to create AI. Now, the claim I am making is that we are doing a mistake by focusing on sovereignty, which can be a red herring for good governance. Sovereignty and good governance are two separate things, and there is a certain criticality that is needed when you think about sovereignty. Next slide, please. So first criticality you have to think about is this thing about infrastructure. Like, before you can even make AI systems, you need AI infrastructure, right? And so the way we as a country are thinking about this right now is that we are going to spend a lot of money to buy GPU chips. GPUs or general processing units are these hardware components which are very necessary for AI development. Now, the reason why I caution against this tactic is because we almost completely buy our chips from a few companies outside India. We buy them from NVIDIA, we buy them from Taiwan. Uh, these chips right now simply cannot be built within India given the structure we have. There are two ways to look at this problem. Either you spend all your money buying hardware right now, and you should be aware that that hardware will become obsolete and irrelevant in 6 months to 1 year, because that is the speed of uh, AI development. And we have seen this, right? Like NVIDIA almost had a global dominance on chip development. And then suddenly the tariff war between America and the Eastern countries, China and Taiwan starts, and NVIDIA almost overnight loses a significant amount of its company valuation. The other way to think about infrastructure, which is what we are not thinking about, and which I think is going to bypass this problem, is that you think about infrastructure in terms of human capital. If you are buying all your chips, if you are buying all your talent, if you are importing all your talent by promising a lot of money to researchers from outside, you are only putting a band-aid on the problem. The real thing to do is to develop capacity in a way that eventually there are Indian researchers, eventually there are Indian AI research groups and also governance groups, like groups working on AI policy, which can make policy in India rather than copy it from either America or China or from EU. So to do that, you need to invest in education, critical thinking, more college campuses, etc. And that is also AI infrastructure. Sometimes we forget that infrastructure can be something much more basic than, hey, let's make chip development factories. And if we can't do that, let us buy like a lot of very expensive chips from America. A very good example of these two tactics can be seen from the recent deployment of a foundational model from from a Chinese company. China recently deployed a model which could actually beat on every benchmark American models. But you should be aware that China does not have access to A100 chips. A100 chips are NVIDIA chips, which are pretty powerful. And because they are, America makes certain that China cannot get its hand on those chips. It has sanctions, etc. in place. So the hardware the Chinese company had access to was quite weak hardware. They were H800, H600 and H800 chips. Despite that, because they had the human resource and they had a long decades worth of research going on, they could do more innovation with less hardware. That is something we can learn from China. Next slide, please. Another way of looking at the sovereignty issue is the sovereignty of data. And here, the argument which comes from Indian policy circles is localization, that we should keep Indian data within Indian borders, and we should force other countries, if they want to buy that data, to pay us money for getting that data. Localization does not work. It does not work because richer countries will not buy your data. They will buy subsidiaries within your border. They will train local models from data within India, and then they will export the model. You don't need to actually take data outside of Indian borders. So again, and at a very hardware level, we will never be able to compete in localization. Why? Temperature. Data storage is vastly resource intensive when it comes to temperature. It needs to be cool. And India lacks the two factors which are relevant to this. So for example, we are a very hot country. And if you want to keep your data centers cool and you want to compete with Finland and Norway and Scandinavian countries, you need to use a lot of water to cool the data centers. And we don't have that much water. In fact, we are lacking in groundwater resources.
uh, ergo, it is vital that instead of trying to look at localization as a central point on infrastructure, we start asking questions: what enables AI research without sinking in vast amounts of data? So work on smaller models instead of large language models and foundational models. And that kind of work is not possible without what I said before, which is AI research capacities as infrastructure. Next slide, please. Second claim. So now, after the infrastructure debate, the thing which we talk about a lot in India is AI safety. We are creating our own safety institutes. We are saying that we are going to make certain R models do not harm society, which is a good idea. But the way we are trying to do that is through the lens of AI safety, that we should internally create an algorithm which is not biased, which is not harmful, which falls within certain parameters of certain benchmarks. Next slide, please. This doesn't work because, first of all, you do not want unbiased but harmful deployments of AI. So I wrote this sentence: I do not want unbiased concentration camps. So I'm using the extreme example of Nazi Germany, who had concentration camp where they were oppressing a lot of people. Do you want an AI algorithm which is used to randomly arrest a lot of people, but is doing it in an unbiased manner? One big example of that is the American justice system. In America, they started to use AI systems to decide on bail applications in judicial cases. Just like India, America has a large country, has a lot of judicial cases. There was pendency. So what they started to do is that they used a AI algorithm called Compass, COMPAS, to decide which people should get bail, which people should. Now, there was a report which came out later that it was a biased algorithm, and racial minorities, etc., were not getting bails, whereas others were. My question is that a correct use of AI, even if it were unbiased? And it's not, because judicial decisions ultimately require human agency. I will come. Next slide, please. Sometimes AI systems are not so much as they are biased or unbiased. Instead, they are bad. Like, they shouldn't exist even if they're biased. Why? Even if they were unbiased. Why? Because most AI systems use machine learning, which is glorified statistical modeling, right? In statistics, you will always have errors. If the social cost of making that error exceeds the social benefit of accelerating that process, you should not use AI in that system. And usage of AI systems to decide bail applications in America was one of those things, because there will be errors. All of you who have worked in statistics on machine learning, you would know that there are always going to be probabilistic errors in these systems. You should not wait for that error to happen in a certain use case where that error will deprive somebody of their constitutional rights, etc., which is what happened in America. Next slide, please. So bias is not an optimizational problem. It is an epistemological problem. Epistemology simply means where knowledge comes from. See, ultimately, AI is not a substitute for human intelligence. It is just finding patterns from human intelligence. Give it a lot of data, it finds pattern from it. Human data itself is biased. Like, if you look at the contemporary top of the line AI models like ChatGPT, etc., they are all trained on a data set called Common Crawl, which is a data set which crawls over the entire internet and copy paste all the data from all the internet, like all the language that exists on the internet. You simply cannot unbias that data, because that data comes from human sources, and humans are notoriously biased. So instead of worrying about the unbiased angle of AI safety, you should ask yourself a question: what if it goes wrong? Do I want to automate this process? Next slide, please. So another framework which is often used is responsible AI. The idea is that we should use AI in a manner which is responsible, follows the parameters of Indian Constitution, etc., and becomes like a public good. It is used for the public's benefit. The problem with this angle of AI governance is that when you use the word responsible, you have already conceded that a certain use case needs to be there. Like when you are saying responsible, you are basically saying don't use it in an irresponsible manner, use it in a responsible manner. But you have completely not asked the question, should I use it in the first place? And with AI, often a lot of time this happens that policymakers have already thought in their head, we should use AI. They do not ask themselves, should we use it in a particular case? And AI is very context specific. Sometimes you should not be using it because the mere usage of it harms constitutional or economic values and is not an economic benefit. We saw this a lot recently with the deployment of AI systems in other countries for things like airport conveyance, etc. Like in a lot of countries like China, Singapore, etc., they were using facial recognition tech to make airport conveyance easier for passengers. But what was seen is that in most cases, that data got leaked, was misused, created a lot of privacy issues, etc., etc. On the other side, the lines did not get faster. Like the whole point of doing all that, spending all that money in China, in all those places, was that, oh, at least the lines would get faster. That didn't happen because turns out that well-trained human beings are faster and also more responsible. If your algorithm goes wrong at your airport and your flight is going to go away and you have nobody to talk to, you have missed your flight. If there is a policeman and they make an error in recognizing you, at least you can argue with them. Next slide, please. You have to remember stochasticity. Stochasticity means there are certain digital systems which have an element of probability in them. You cannot remove stochasticity from AI, which means that in all AI systems, there will be an element of probability. There will be, because there is an element of probability, there will be error. So never use an AI deployment in a use case where a human deployment, humans also make errors, but again, human errors are attributable to people. You can hold somebody's collar and ask them, hey, why did you make that error? Algorithms are not attributable. They are not accountable. And the second thing, opaqueness. Why an algorithm works the way it does only happens in easy algorithms. In complicated AI algorithms, it is not possible for it to give you an explanation why it came to a wrong conclusion. One area where this created a lot of problems in other more advanced countries was using AI to decide on bank loans and insurances. Sometimes the loan would get rejected or the insurance would get rejected. The customer would ask, why did you reject my loan application? I am a good person. I gave all my previous installments. And then the manager would say, I don't know. The AI algorithm said that we have to reject you. We don't know why that happened. This, of course, creates issue in trust. It creates issue in trust between government and citizens, between corporates and customers. And there is nobody in the chain you can hold accountable. Next slide, please. This is a little hard concept, reification. Bear with me. Reification means that you create a category and that category becomes correct. Like, suppose I give you guys a quiz, which is like, what is your favorite food? And I give you three options: sandwich, biryani, vada pav. You all have to choose one of the three. Now, somebody might say, "Hi, I don't like any of these three. I like something else. I like chow mein better than all three options." But I did not give you the option. So, if everybody starts to use that quiz, soon at an Indian government level, we will be making policy. There are only three foods in India: sandwich, biryani, vada pav. No other food exists. And of course, that will create problems, right? So you have to remember that all machine learning systems are using data sets, and the categories of those data sets are being set by humans. And humans sometimes make wrong data set. One very Big example of this is emotion tech or emotion AI. AI systems trying to figure out what is the emotion of a human being. Many scientists have commented and come to the conclusion that emotion tech is fraud. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because the actual emotion of a human being is not visible on their face. You know, there is a famous Hindi song, तुम इतना क्यों मुस्कुरा रहे हो, क्या गम है जिसे छुपा रहे हो. We all know that human emotions are very complex. They don't translate to face. But because AI engineers made emotion tech and they assumed that human emotions translate to facial expression, you have a huge emotion tech economy. In fact, China, and again, America and China are guilty of a lot of bad use of AI. In China, there is $1 billion industry of emotion tech. So even though something does not work from a scientific angle, it can create a huge economic imprint and then create problems because people are buying it, because people think that they can buy and tell the emotions of their customer or can tell the emotion of their employee. They start thinking dangerous thing. Like the Chinese police think that we can use this tech to find out terrorist kaun hai ya criminal kaun hai, right? And it doesn't work. So ordinary innocent people get harassed. So it is very important that when the categories of a data set are made, they be scientifically verified that do the categories make sense. Next slide, please. Hello. Somebody saying something? Often, and this is a very important point, similar to the last point, AI tech is validated against benchmarks. And who creates the benchmarks? Other AI engineers, often not in conversation with people who know other aspects of society. This is one of the very interesting things about AI. In other areas of science and engineering, no civil engineer will claim they understand the law of thermodynamics. No physicist will claim they understand how a zygote works in biology. But you have AI systems by AI scientists being made which are trying to solve hunger, which are trying to solve how traffic runs, which are trying to solve demographic crisis, which are trying to solve how market runs, which are trying to solve finance. And none of these AI scientists, and I come from a training with AI, I myself know how this works. None of these scientists are psychologists or physicists or biologists or chemists or economists, etc. They create AI systems and they benchmark those AI systems by standards they have developed, often without consultation with subject area experts. And that is why you see a lot of snake oil in AI. Snake oil means fraudulent AI. AI is one of the most fraudulent areas, by the way. I'm saying this despite being one of the people who works in AI. And hence, if you want good governance of AI, it is vital you do not blindly trust benchmarks, because often benchmarks do not reflect the truth. Next slide, please. The McNamara fallacy. Robert McNamara was a American Secretary of State long time back in the 70s and the 80s. He was an American politician. And he was basically the Secretary of State is like Home Minister in India, a very powerful person. And he was a top official in America when America was going through a war, Vietnam War. And Robert McNamara told the policymakers, if there is something that cannot be measured, I don't want to hear about it. Only truth is truth which can be measured. Basically, he said, I want data-driven proof. And we all know the result of that. America lost the Vietnam War because data does not capture truth. There are certain things which are not quantifiable, which are not measured in a quantitative manner, which are measured in a qualitative manner. And the problem with AI is that it is completely quantitative. It does not reflect complex realities of societies, which simply cannot be measured in a data-driven manner. And this could lead to public policy and governance problems if not taken cognizance of. Next slide, please. So this is the last slide. What I've been trying to tell is that governance around AI is what in public policy is called a wicked problem. It is not an easy problem to solve because it's not an engineering problem. It is connected to how society operates and actually existing AI which exists in the market, AI which is there right now, not some future AI which is very idealistic, but AI which you can buy from the market right now. It affect society, so it becomes a political problem. Like anything which affects society, society affects it back. And that is why it needs a democratic oversight. You must not let AI be completely governed only by the producers of AI, which is the private companies. What do I mean by democratic oversight? Do I mean that give everybody a vote in India and ask, is this AI system good or not? Of course not. People don't understand. But you need to get input of people who do not have a financial incentive in selling you something. You need to talk to people who are not trying to, मतलब हिंदी में जिसे बोलते हैं आपको चूरन नहीं बेचना चाहते. So need to talk to academics who don't have a conflict of interest with the same AI companies which are pushing certain use cases of AI, so that you buy the correct use cases of AI when thinking from a governance point of view. The second thing is you need to have bright red lines, and these bright red lines need to be derived from the Indian Constitution and the Indian democratic system, that whatever AI you deploy, it should not violate the basics of what makes us India as a country. So that is my talk. I hope you all liked it, and thank you.
Thank you, sir, for very, very interesting perspective from both of your sides. We have a couple of questions, as you can see, lined up in the chat box. I'll maybe, because of paucity of time, we'll take a few of them. The first one is, what factors enabled the digital economy to grow at a pace unmatched by traditional industry?
Professor Jha, you want to take it, right?
I think it was delayed the lecture.
Maybe ऊपर करना पड़ेगा, ऊपर ये first है क्या? Okay, we have should governments treat data similarly to natural resources, that is as collective asset? नीचे. Sir, you're on mute. Jha sir, you're on mute.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first question was basically something I was trying to, raise and answer. What is the disruption that is happening, right? What enabled the digital economy? The second is, yes, my view is that it can be a collective asset, but doesn't have to be a natural resource. The collective nature of that, it's not just that only natural resources can be a collective asset. You could have non-natural resources also as, so which is what is called a public good.
Yeah.
So the answer is that, well, not a natural resource, but yes, potentially a public good. You can use public policy to navigate the use of that resource. That will be my quick answer.
We have more questions in line with what sir you spoke about. Is it possible for digital platforms to balance user privacy with economic growth driven by data analytics?
Say it again, sorry, the balance of?
Is it possible for digital platforms to balance user privacy with economic growth driven by data analytics?
Yeah, I think it is very much possible. The problem right now, what we have is that we put all our eggs, mostly a lot of our eggs in the basket of actually particular kind of endless mining of data. So any rethinking or any way that we try to introduce privacy is seen as an impediment, right? So in fact, my argument would go to the other extent that actually privacy makes, particular ways of thinking about privacy makes even better sense for commercial entities, because we, in some ways, can reaffirm a certain approach to, use of data. Right now, it's filled with anxiety. It's filled with worry about what is happening to the way that data is used. Right. The way to do that is to rethink from the corporate side, right, how one can reaffirm for the user, right, that they don't feel anxious, but how the data can be, kept, the privacy norms can be kept, maintained, and can be used in certain forms that the companies want, right? I think these are not irreconcilable. They can be reconciled. That's my argument.
Maybe one last question from Professor Anupam, which is which country currently has most comprehensive AI regulatory framework?
So, EU has not only the most comprehensive AI regulatory framework, the only AI regulatory framework. No other country right now, aside from EU, has a specific law for AI. So, other countries are trying to draft some policies. So, American states are trying to draft some policies, but America does not have a federal level law or policy on AI. Only EU right now has a specific law for AI. I wouldn't, 100% endorse their way of doing things. Like I have some issues with the law. For example, I wrote a newspaper article when the EU law came out that there are some weaknesses in it. So, for example, it does not. Remember, I was talking about emotion tech not being good. It does not ban emotion tech. It only says government should not use it. So it does not look at the private harms, etc. But having said that, they are the forerunners in making a law on AI. Unfortunately, India has not. We are very behind EU when it comes to these things. And as far as I know, China also does not have any law yet, although they are in the process of framing a law on AI.
So we'll take last comments from DG sir. So you want to say something?
I think the lectures were very, rather than lecture, the talks were very interesting. I think each one of the talk would have been, longer, but I think we have a shorter format. But I think if interested, we can organize a longer talk. And then I think like Professor Shishir Jha's talk, he raised the issue and the trends and the important points. But what are the implications for governance? What are we doing? And if the governance models are there, then what changes they need to be made, they need to be going through, or what is the effectiveness of those governance model? So I think the issues in if looked at from the perspective of governance, public governance, and concerns of citizens, how they are effective and what can be done, and what more research can be done. We're also interested in policy research on those issues. So what questions for policy research and how those policy research question can be addressed or answered. What kind of data, what kind of support those questions require. I think there are many people who have interest in that. And I think that kind of discussion would be very interesting, and that can actually generate many ideas for potential research, talk, sharing of the ideas, how to go about sharing this, create policy brief which can be relevant. And yeah, I think professor is typing something, so we'll chat. And yeah. And as far as Professor Anupam's lecture was concerned, I think it's very relevant. You raised very important issue, and each one of them require a lot of deliberation and a lot of reading and understanding. And I think so. We would like to further, discuss with you offline, both of you. And I think we want to extend our cooperation. We already have MOU with IIT Bombay signed, but we would like to be very interested in some kind of policy research. And if your students are interested, they can also work on the issues. We'll support. So I think it was very interesting. The issues raised were very pertinent. They require much more deliberation, and hopefully, I think we should be able to again take up similar topics and have a larger debate. I think on many issues which Professor Anupam raised. So I think this is very good beginning, I would say, not the end of it, and we should continue to have discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, on behalf of National Center.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I extend gratitude to the eminent speaker for sparing time for this webinar. This is only, like Sir just pointed out, a start of a conversation. This has to be taken ahead, spoken about more, discussed more. Like Shishir Sir has pointed out in the chat that local governance is something that is also left in the background. So the dialogue should be ongoing. So thank you to the speakers for sparing time and initiating this very, very important discussion. And thank you to all the participants who joined. This is a monthly event that we do. And next month, we will be doing this with the IIT Roorkee. So thank you once again, sir, for joining. Thank you, DG, sir, for chairing the event. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you to the
so much.
organizers. Wonderful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.